Welcome to the Informal Game. My name's Griff. I got Chris over there behind the camera. Today we're going to talk a little bit about dealing with unexpected situations like I need to run my players through a city, but I don't have anything prepped. So stay tuned. So D&D, I always use these books, these simple old books, because these are kind of they're what everything's based on. Doesn't matter what edition of D&D you have or any other RPG you have. It's all coming from these old books right here, and they're just rewriting some of the rules, but it's all plug and play, doing the same thing. I had a situation come up a while back where I had my players start in Blackmoor, and they were in the town of Blackmoor. Well, the town of Blackmoor is really well documented. You've got maps everywhere. I got a map here in this book. Let me get the dice out of the way and show you. So here, this is the town of Blackmoor, and that's a great resource. Dave Arneson made this probably around 1971. He drew this map. This is the copy that David McGarry had. So we're showing a scan of his map, which has color coding on the buildings. But it's a really useful little map for running adventures in a little town. The problem is that my characters, or my players, had wandered to Vestfold, and there isn't a lot of documentation out there on Vestfold, so I didn't really know what to do. And also, I kind of like to personalize campaigns. I'm not really into... I like to read modules and prefab stuff, but I like to alter it to make it a little bit more my own thing, and that's probably just because I have trouble reading instructions and I get them all jumbled in my head and I'll screw it up. So my players wandered over to Vestfold. I can show you a Blackmoor map really quick. Somewhere in here I've got a Blackmoor world map. Here we go. Here's an old Blackmoor world map. So you've got Blackmoor, the town here. You've got mountains through here, these spiky things. These cones are forest areas. And you've got a road. This town here is the Tower of Boo, which is where all the little halflings live. And then you go over here, and you end up at Vestfold, which is considered the Earl of Vestfold is kind of the ruler of the whole domain, actually. Blackmoor isn't really the center of all the action. But the problem is I have this map here, and it doesn't really give me a lot of information about what this city should look like. So I'm familiar with an old city that's called Verona, and I have this map here. So I had seen this map. This map is really old, but I'm very familiar with the geography of Verona. I'll show you what's going on here. And what you have with Verona is you have a really old city. It was a Roman city at one time. You've got walls around the city from the Napoleonic era, and then that go out to here. Obviously, the city was really big by the time of Napoleon. But you've also got an inner curtain wall over here that is the old medieval wall. And the other thing about Verona is that it's built in layers, so along with the, in the time of, say, the Renaissance or the medieval period before, it was already an ancient city. There are Roman ruins. There's an amphitheater in here that's Roman, so that could have been, who knows, maybe 1,000 years old about by the time the medieval times roll around. This is 1,000 years old and already falling apart. And there literally are places in this city, because it has silted over with water, where there are underground passages, because cities do this thing over time where people come in, they bring things into the city, and a lot of the stuff in earlier times just decomposes and becomes dirt. And then the river's flooding and it's bringing dirt in. And so what you end up with is what's known as a tell. And it's this layered thing that a lot of old cities have, with old foundations and abandoned buildings buried underneath the new buildings. So I looked at this map, and what I thought was interesting about it is that you have a main city right here in the center, and you've got this fold in the river. And so what I decided to do, and actually I even renamed my city of Blackmoor, or not of Blackmoor, of Vestfold, I decided to create a really simple concept for a city. My players got there, and I described what the situation was. I guess I should use blue for water. In this case, the situation was that you had this river that comes in, and it does this sort of shape like that, just like Verona, and goes off. And you have, just like Verona, you've got city walls here with towers and such. Maybe a big gate here. Towers. And I looked at what I had there. I've got this area, and that's going to be my city. And my river's big. My river is big. This thing is slow moving and deep. And there's also an island out here. I figure there's an island out here where, here's my island in the river. And that's where the Tonisborg dungeon is over here. We'll put a big X. So my players, I just laid a piece of paper on the table, and I said, this is a situation, and I drew out what you see here, or something like it. And I said, the merchant's quarter is this area right here, and you've got a big castle over here where the earl lives. This area over here is kind of like a shady part of town. There's a lot of textile workers living over here. I just broke it up into the different quarters. The nobles live near the castle. So you got merchants, nobles, the earl, the low-class people over here, and maybe these are just mostly commoners over here, and there's going to be stuff over there for the players to explore. The main thing I didn't do was I didn't get into details. I just let it be really loose, and I would just describe situations when the players got to where they wanted to be. If you think about your own experience of your life, let's say you have a favorite place you like to go to. You can close your eyes and visualize everything around your house, your front yard, your backyard, what's in your house. You leave your house and you get in your car and you start driving. Well, if you close your eyes and try to imagine every place on your journey to the place you're going to, you probably can't visualize all of that. But the place you want to go to, if you've been there before, a lot of times you do know what that place is like, and you can visualize it if you close your eyes, like, oh yeah, this is my favorite store or whatever. So it's kind of like that. It's sort of like that in real life, so why not in a game? There's no need to do a really detailed city map sometimes if you just want to go from point to point in the city. I just drew out these sections, and then when players wanted to go to a different part of the city, like one guy he bought a really nice sword, and he spent like 1,000 gold pieces getting this really nice sword made. And so we role-played that, bargaining for the price and everything. And then he knew that he had to come back like a week later and they'd have his sword ready. But we just kind of determined, I don't even remember where on the map it was. Maybe it was over here, So that's where his armorer is that he likes to go to. That is a really simple way to deal with a city as far as the map and what's going on here. My big problem with cities is that a lot of times your players tend to have a lot of experience going into dungeons, going out in the wilderness. And as much as gamers like to talk about wanting to role play and develop their character, what I see is a lot of people are just going out and killing stuff and fighting, and they seem to think that that's the solution to every problem. So the big problem is that as your players get into the city, they're going to have this preconception about problem solving that involves you just fight things and kill them. But a city is a really different place, and you have to sort of convey to them that we are in a civilized land, and we're not going to draw our swords and stab people because they're not doing what we want them to do. We might get into a big punch-up or something like that, but drawing steel is really bad. I remember one group I was playing with, for some reason I couldn't make it to the game session, and the players were all in a city. It was a big city, and they had some encounter. They were supposed to go to this bar, but it was frequented by orcs and goblins and stuff. And they proceeded to go to that locale and just set it on fire and burn it to the ground. And it was supposed to be, I talked to the dungeon master later, and he was like, I don't know, they were just supposed to go meet somebody there and talk to them and get information. Next thing I know, they're like setting the place on fire and hacking at everything, and they left and it burned to the ground, it's a problem because now the city guard is after them. The ruler of the city is like, these people are bad, we need to exterminate them. So they went from being the lawful good and neutral good types that are supposed to be fighting the forces of evil to being the bad guys in that campaign. I think that it's very easy to just deal very loosely like this and create interesting situations. The other thing about cities is that, once again, this idea of like how players interact with a city, it's really difficult because a lot of times players aren't used to creating their own adventure. And you'll probably hear words like sandbox and things like that. And the idea is that you just have a world and you go out and you explore it and you create your own objectives by going out and talking to people and interacting with the world around you. But most players don't really know how to inject themselves into that kind of setting. And so if you don't, as a DM, give them stuff to do, they might just get bored. I think a lot of times the reason cities get burned down is because players are bored and they're like, let's do something interesting. Combat is interesting. Let's just tear it up. And one of the things I did in my own campaign is that I started blending genres, which is kind of interesting because if you think about the original Blackmoor campaign, it's a mixed genre campaign. It's fantasy, it's gothic horror, it's sci-fi. All those things are bundled up together into one weird setting. And so what I did was, we're in a city. There's always the threat of the Egg of Coot. The Egg of Coot is sending its spies down to Blackmoor and wanting to basically cause trouble, get information, cause trouble, assassinate people, what have you, all the bad things. So I turned my campaign into a fantasy setting Cold War spy game. And my players, they would do things that spies do. And spies do things like they try to go somewhere and just contact somebody and pass information. A lot of times the other side is watching, and so you have to figure out how to sneak out of where you are so they don't know where you're going. And all you're really doing is you're just setting up a meeting. You got to go meet somebody. The problem is that the other side knows that you're involved with the spy network, and so they're going to be watching. At the same time, there's the assassin class in D&D. Assassins are essentially the spies. They're spy characters. And in my city of Vestfold, there is an assassins guild, and their real function is that they are like the MI6 or the CIA of Vestfold, and they are working for the Earl. And what happened was my Thieves Guild started working a deal with some of the Egg of Coot people, and they were going to set up a journey down into the dungeon to coordinate an attack on the city, and they were going to assist in making it so that an army of orcs could come up out of the dungeon here and across the bridge through the old gate into the city and sort of cause chaos so that the forces on the outside could then break through, because there would be like a flanking maneuver going on. So my players played this whole thing out where they were trying to stop the invasion, but not fighting armies or doing the really big stuff like that. They just needed to find out what was going on so they could ruin the plans of the bad guys. Because that's kind of what spy work is like. It's just figuring out what the plan is, throwing a wrench into the plan, and you've solved the problem. So maybe that's something you can use in your campaign. I don't know. Everybody has a different approach to how they like to run cities. I'm very excited about doing sort of the Cold War spy thing with my fantasy stuff, because it's actually really interesting and really sneaky. The other thing I'll talk about more about cities in a future episode. This is just kind of like a quickie. This is how you make a city that's a big city without having to get into all the details. I'll talk about cities in a future episode because I think that there's so much to dig into there. There's Empire of the Petal Throne has a big city map. It might be the first one that was published. You've got all the old Blackmoor stuff, the Blackmoor Town maps here. You've also got the city-state of the Invincible Overlord is probably the most amazing city setting that's ever been created for an RPG and is really worth looking at. So I'll get that out and talk a little bit about that one. RPGs should be easy and fun. We got a map in this book of Blackmoor Town that you can use. There's no reason that you shouldn't just use one map and then later you just switch it. You can tell your players out of game, sort of metagame it, like, I made a better map, we're going to be using that from now on. They'll be fine with it. Or you can just tell them some sort of weird magical cataclysm happened and the town has changed and they don't know why. And you never have to explain it because it's magic, right? So we're going to make this map available. I'll just put it down here so you can see it. Just go to the description of this video and you'll find the link to the map in there. So you can download this and have access to kind of a fun map to use in your own games. Really appreciate you coming by to watch our show. Make sure to give us a like and a subscribe, and we'll see you next time on The Informal Game.